Bringing you the rigs, the trucks, the laboratories, and offices, this is the Oil and Gas Contractors Connect podcast with your host, Ryan Ray.
Welcome to another edition of the Oil and Gas Contractors Connect podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Ray, as always, and this is the show where you get to connect with oil and gas contractors from upstream, midstream, downstream, all over the world of oil and gas. And if you or your company would like to be featured on the show, it's pretty simple. Just connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know. You can find my LinkedIn information in the show notes. Also, want to thank our sponsor of the show, which is R Squared Global. For more information about R Squared Global, go to GOR2.com. That's GOR, the number 2.com. On today's episode, we have on Erik Waters, the Vice President of Operations, and David Bateman, the CEO with SitePro. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, really excited about being here, Ryan.
Yeah, it's exciting. And first off, let's just start with the name SitePro. And does the name have any special ramifications? And then what is it that you guys do, and where do you fit in the industry?
Well, the company, funnily, it's kind of funny. It used to be named Amplisign Labs, and we just, people always ask me, they'll say, well, why did you change the names? I said, well, say SitePro and Amplisign in the same sentence and see if you still ask me that. So, we rebranded the company to SitePro because it really captures kind of it's a good brand that kind of captures what we're doing. That's the main driver of our revenue is, sites, number of sites that we get in the system, whether that's, so a little bit about SitePro and what we do. So we're a technology company and we're focused on, delivering fluid management solutions to the upstream oil and gas business. And how we do that is through the deployment of our automation software system. So our software was always called SitePro, and we just recently changed the company to it. So we install automation systems on big facilities in oil and gas, such as saltwater disposal, production facilities, pits, ponds, pipelines, risers, other things like that. And it's really, SitePro is a system that helps to digitize, we're really on the forefront of this digital transformation in the oil and gas fields. And that's really what we're doing, one well and facility at a time is, we have a field service team that installs control panels, meters, monitors, antennas, things like that, so we can get data and information from these assets and display them through our, cloud-based software system so that our customers, in real time can understand what's going on to help them make better decisions and operate more safe and efficiently. So that's kind of a high-level overview of SitePro and, the naming conventions.
Okay, so let's go back to something you said there a minute ago. Let's kind of break this down. You mentioned saltwater disposal wells. Let's kind of take this in two parts. First off, for listeners who might not be familiar with the upstream part of the business, what is a saltwater disposal well? And then secondly, how do you guys fit into that picture? Sure.
So if you look at, people always ask me kind of how we got started. So in 2012, when the company got started, horizontal drilling became a new thing, drilling unconventionals. And with this, it created a big water need in, oil and gas drilling and production. Water kind of comes from two places. So you need water to, do frac jobs, and that's more on the sourcing and supply side of it, which we sell systems for those as well. But once you're done drilling and completing a well, the number one byproduct of the production of that well is water and, produced water, they call it. And, there's some recycling and some different methods and things that are going on like that. However, the number one way that this water is disposed of nowadays is through saltwater disposal wells. So these are wells that are drilled into, formations that generally will absorb the water. And there's, big facilities that, on the surface that, take in this water. So, back in 2012 when we got started, there was a big, a lack of this infrastructure in areas where they were doing a lot of this horizontal drilling. And traditional SCADA systems didn't quite fit the bill for what these saltwater disposal systems needed, because they want to be more, know what's going on in real time better, and also have a transactional and data analytics element to what they're going on, because they're taking water from different operators and leases and everything. So an SWD, as we call it, is really just a facility that takes in this produced water, but they're a big asset, and they actually charge the E&P companies to dispose of their water there. Some have long-term contracts and things like that. But at the end of the day, 55% of an oil well's life cycle cost comes from, this produced water. So these SWDs make it possible to drill economically in, some of these new shale plays.
Yeah, one of the key things that David hit on was infrastructure, Ryan. And so going back to 2012, if you look at the model of the market, it was maybe a one-off or a two-off, and there were a couple of companies that really had quasi systems in the marketplace. But most of the water used to always be trucked to the disposal. One of the key things that SitePro has been able to help bridge the gap, and really in an underserved market, is these things are now systems. So just like you have the midstream marketplace that's being used to pipe oil and gas, you now have systems, especially some of our bigger clients have systems of water disposal where everything is connected through a pipeline. And so having just a one-off automation or SCADA system for one site just doesn't serve the need when you're trying to handle hundreds of thousands, or in the case of some of our clients, very quickly, millions of barrels of fluid a day.
The water industry, as you mentioned, it's changed drastically over the last handful of years, and you've talked about SCADA and technology. Sticking with just the EP side of things, what advances, I get this question all the time. We always hear about advances in technology. What advances in technology? Now, obviously, nothing proprietary here, but generally, from the water standpoint of the business, dealing with these saltwater disposal wells and things like that, what are some of the technological advances that you guys seen that may shock people? Because what I hear so often, guys, is we keep hearing about technological advances, but we don't know what they are. So is there any insight you could give us from what you guys do that you go, you know what, in 2012, we never would have thought we would have been using this kind of technology today?
Sure. So, a couple of key differences with SitePro, on the tech stack is traditional SCADA systems use what they called is a PLC, programmable logic controller. And our SitePro control panels are outfitted with an industrial PC. And this is actually a computer that's, rated for, industrial use. And with that, we're able to, have a whole cloud-based system where we can drag and drop configurations, make changes to things that are going on site in real time, get analytics, run lots of analytical processes to ultimately give our customers a lot better information. Another part of the technology specifically that we've patented is remote control of fluid handling devices. So we've kind of, pioneered some of that technology through the use of, cloud-based subscription services. And, it really helps our clients save, quite a bit of time and money. I mean, we've seen instances where people went from a, 24/7, manned facility, one man forever facility to kind of a regional manager approach where, maybe one or two guys would cover, an entire region, with multiple facilities, because they're able to use their mobile device and their computers to be able to diagnose problems, understand, use predictive analytics to understand problems before they happen, get ahead of them. And at the end of the day, it's about downtime, or really uptime. Oil and gas industry, especially with these high volumes of water, they can't afford to have any downtime. So, using these systems like this, not only is it more safe and efficient, but, it speaks to their heart by trying to keep, all these facilities running with as much uptime as possible. And Erik, feel free to add anything that you might want to.
Yeah, I think the first thing that David really hit on a lot of times in terms of the configurations, that it takes a little bit to sink in. Like a lot of times guys will struggle through or have hours of downtime. But one of the unique things with SitePro is that, because we're running a PC out there in the field, we'll download the update in the background. And then when our clients want to go out there and update their site, all it is a reboot, because the download of the new software version is already there, ready to go. And the other thing is, it's not the biggest thing that we always have to get through when we talk to customers is it's not an automation technician that's doing ladder logic anymore. These are software developers that are skilled in their trade, that have written an interface that, you or I, Ryan, with just a little bit of training can go in and configure their sites. And that kind of funnels into the last thing, is that traditionally, if you wanted to connect a piece of automation in to drive some function, that means going out and pulling some other wires and terminating it in another panel. But one of the great things, unique things about SitePro is we have all the ability to create all sorts of virtual sensors. So if you want to all of a sudden run a pump off another PT on your site, or another flow meter, or another actuator, or a combination of those, we can just go in and create what we call a virtual sensor, and then operate off of that to automate, valves opening, to move fluid from one tank to another, or to set a pump to run at different frequencies or different speeds based off of the tank height in the system to optimize their site.
I think a minute ago you guys mentioned, and if not, it's on the website for sure, this midstream idea. And water and midstream, that's not a term that you really heard too often. You'd hear about people building water lines, but it feels like there's a whole new water industry in midstream, in the midstream sector, and it's water. And it's kind of interesting because, we've obviously moved water around via pipelines for a long period of time, but it feels like in the last, 12, 18 months, this idea has really taken the industry by storm. Where do you guys fit into the midstream part of the water business?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And you certainly, talked to some of the things that we've seen in the market. So we've really seen the transformation of this water side of the oil and gas business, into this water midstream, look and feel. And we're seeing long-term contracts by producers to give these water companies acreage dedications and, various things that look and feel a lot more like a midstream, process. And I would say where we fit into it is, whenever we look at a lot of other solutions in this space, especially in the SCADA world, they're designed very specifically into a very, usually a function around optimization of a certain process or something like that. But SitePro brings it all in. So, we have everything from the, water sourcing systems, supply wells going into pits and ponds and pipelines for water transfer and delivery. And then, on the disposal side, as Erik said, this has kind of changed to a, multiple disposal well hooked up by pipelines. The assets look and feel a lot more like that. And really, SitePro was designed to meet that exact need. And, there's been for a long time in the industry, a lot of sophisticated ways to measure and monitor hydrocarbons. But whenever it came to water, which was their number one operating expense, there was a lot of ambiguity. So whenever it comes to, allocating water by lease and well and understanding it, for, sharpening the pencil and predicting costs and things like that, SitePro is that tool that gives our customers the data to make that happen.
Yeah, to really hone in on that, data is the key to all this, whether you're billing a client or you're trying to optimize the system. And one of the challenges that we help clients get around, and kind of unique back to that system point that David was talking about, is that you might have, just for geographical reasons, 7 or 8 meters that are getting radioed back to a single site. But that might not be how your system works or how you view that data. Well, in SitePro, we have the ability to create systems of sites, and we call them systems. And it helps you basically manipulate that data into an artifact or into an object that you can understand to balance the inflows and outflows, not just for that one site, but really for that system, getting back to that midstream idea or that collection of assets and disposals idea that you're trying to really gain the most value of, instead of just a one-off.
Well, and to really add to Erik's point there, whenever the saltwater disposal industry transformed into a water midstream industry, there were certain requirements, that were a prerequisite to that happen. If you're going to ask a producer to dedicate some of their acreage to your, to send the water to your asset, well, you better be able to promise them that those assets aren't going to go down. If you have a failure or a well shut in, that can be very costly to a producer. So a lot of these water midstream networks have been, built so that water may come in through multiple receiving points, and then, backing it up is a big pipeline system with multiple disposal wells that can accommodate whatever that operator's needs might be.
Yeah, and we talk about a lot of things about water, and I was joking about the midstream business and how that's just boomed. And the final thing is water sourcing. And we covered a story, and I can't remember what it was now. It's been a little while back on Texas Oil and Gas Podcast about some big multi-billion-dollar ranch that sold just for the water and the water sourcing business. That feels like, of all the things we're talking about here, the saltwater disposal wells aren't going anywhere, the pipelines aren't going anywhere, but the water sourcing really feels like over the next 3 to 5 years is going to be the most interesting space to see what happens in the industry. There's talk of, how much brackish water can they use, and counties are trying to figure out regulations. What are you guys seeing in the water sourcing space that maybe some of the folks who are listening haven't really thought about yet?
Sure. Well, first of all, the water transfer, you're looking at to frack a well, anywhere from 600,000 to 1 million barrels of water are going to be needed. And, that's usually one or two, big pits, to frack, just one frack job. So we've seen things change all the way from, sourcing going, and we have a system on just west of Pecos that is, I think it's over 20 miles long, and so and can deliver water to big distances. And so that's what that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, and I think that we're starting to see some of it in the market. Certainly, there's a lot of talk about it, but it's this whole concept of recycle, reuse. There's a lot of questions around the long-term sustainability of, fresh water supply and sourcing for fracking and everything. Although when you compare it to agriculture, it's a very small use of our, overall water. However, the industry is very environmentally concerned about this. We're also starting to see some recycle, reuse efforts where they're taking produced water, treating it, cleaning it, and using it for frac jobs as well. But I think that at the end of the day, there has to be a freshwater component. And I think that, there's a lot of different moving parts to this, especially in the Texas-New Mexico line. The water, how the water is handled and treated from a regulatory perspective is a lot different in Texas than it is New Mexico. And there's just a lot of buzz around this right now.
So as a follow-up to David's point, one of the whole questions on recycling and reuse is water quality. And so it used to be whenever you do a frac job, you'd send your chemical company out to get a sample, and they'd bring it back and do their test and make sure, hey, from that one static sample that your frac recipe is going to hold up. Now, one of the big things we're seeing is the demand for real-time analysis of the constituencies of the water. So, where are my chlorides at? What are my metals at? And what's coming in? Another big part of that we're seeing, or another trend that we're seeing, is that you're not really having different companies doing freshwater and produced water. And at first, that may sound obvious, but traditionally those have been two different sides. You've had the water transfer companies that were really doing the pit-based or the impoundment-based water supply, and you had the saltwater disposal companies that were handling the other. But as you introduce that recycled water, and then you also get to where you're introducing these infrastructure systems that we're talking about with the water midstream or the water disposal companies, you're seeing a consolidation of, hey, if I'm using a pipeline to do X today, I can use it to do Y tomorrow, and it's already there. So those are some of the other trends we're seeing in that space, Ryan.
Okay, so final big question, and maybe you guys can have two different answers or one. I don't really care how you take it. We talked about a lot of stuff here, so you can kind of keep it broad or hone into a specific part of your business we've spoken of. The question I've kind of tried to ask everyone is, as you know, in this business, the oil and gas business, there's always problems like any business. And sometimes, if we're not careful, we don't advise a client properly, we find that something that we could have dealt with very early on in the project becomes a major issue later on in the project. What are some of the things that you guys try to advise clients on early on? Hey, we need to go ahead and make sure we take care of X, Y, and Z today so that 6 months from now we're not being shut down from a permit or landowner or whatever the case may be for your particular business.
Eric, you want to take that one?
So the number one thing is measurement. When the clients come on, a lot of times they've got some very good consultants. We run into lots of consultants because a lot of the clients we see may not have a ton of experience in this space, but like you're saying, Ryan, it's very exciting. So the consultants will give them some advice. And on the measurement side, some things that held true maybe 5 to 10 years ago in terms of the technological methods that you wanted to use and were a good value back then are not the same methodologies that you want to use when you're doing 30,000 or 40,000 barrels a day at one site, or half a billion or 500,000 barrels a day in your system. So that's one. The other thing that people try to do, but they don't always put pen to paper on or always, pay engineers to look at, is what do I really want my system to do? So I know what my business goals are. How can I translate some of those into rules or laws that I can apply to my engineering design so that I can meet those needs?
One thing we try to do at SitePro is not just treat our customers just as another project. I mean, it's really just a long-term partnership. And, like Erik said, we have a lot of, really intimate data that can help them tremendously. And we try to take in, different thoughts and everything from other parts of the industry or other areas we're working, and really to apply it to, come up with good economic solutions where, business objectives are being met through asset management, and SitePro allows that through the data creation and capture.
Okay, well, that's great information to know. So 2 things here. First off, if there's anything we skipped over that you guys say, hey, you know what, we want to circle around and mention this. If not, tell people more about where they can find you. I don't know if you guys have, obviously you have a website, which is will be linked to in the show notes, which is SitePro.com. That's SitePro.com. Will be in the show notes. But is there social media or conferences or events that you guys want to plug or promote before we get you out of here today?
One thing I would just tell, one other service that we've started offering, so we launched what's called SitePro Automation Support, and essentially this is a managed service or an operations center, and we actually have 24/7 staff that monitors our customers' assets for them if they choose us to. In addition to the systems doing it, autonomously. And that's been a really great service. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from it. And I watched something the other day on the news. It was about self-driving cars in California. And they were talking about how they're having these control rooms of folks that, if somebody's about to get in a wreck or something, the control room will take over and try to avoid it. And I think that kind of plays well with the concept that we're trying to accomplish with SOS and SitePro generally. I mean, the digital oil field is this concept of, people and computers and, working in parallel to accomplish goals. And really that's what we're doing with SitePro. And that's just a really interesting service. So for those of you listeners, y'all can find us at SitePro.com, SitePro.com. And, you can fill out information and we'll get in touch with you. We'd, like to hear about anything we can assist you with.
Yeah, absolutely. And as David said, our team will get in touch with you. Be glad to do a demo because really we just, Ryan, we ran out of time and scratched the surface on the back end in the data analytics portion of SitePro and that value that we can bring to our clients. And we kind of talked about it offhand here, but we didn't get into that. And in terms of the events, I think the next thing we're going to be at is SPE in Oklahoma. That's another thing. We've talked a lot about Texas, but we're in other regions, other basins as well. So,
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Where all do you guys work?
So right now we're in the South Central United States, primarily, real heavy in the Permian, both Midland and Delaware basins, Texas and New Mexico. Oklahoma, we're in the Arkoma and the Scoop Stack basin. And then, we also have a lot of activity down in the Eagle Ford. We're looking at other areas to grow now, and we're really looking at the Colorado, Wyoming, Bakken kind of areas. It's one of our next place to plant our next flag.
It seems like there's a lot of hype around that Powder River stuff right now. And I read an article the other day, and it said that lithium is the new black gold, and I thought, no, it's water. Water's where it's at right now. That's the big move. It seems like everyone's at until we get I don't want to say a better handle, but we get a better feel of what the water demand is going to be. We got to think about it. We had a downturn here the last couple of years. We're kind of rebounding. And so, everyone's optimistic right now, which means that we're going to use a lot of water. So it'll be interesting to see how some of these problems are resolved. In the meantime, if you have questions, be sure to check out the great folks at SitePro. We will link to their website in the show notes. That's SitePro.com. Erik, David, thank you so much for coming on. And to the listeners, we'll talk to you next time.